All right, everybody, welcome to the Gilder Spotlight podcast. Today we have a very special guest. His name is Sanjay Goel. He is the founder and CEO of NachoNacho, the biggest SaaS marketplace. But Sanjay, I'd love for you to give our guests a quick background about yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah. Hey, Tiger, great to be here with you. I'm an engineer by training. So I did a bachelor's and master's in electrical engineering and computer science. I learned to design microprocessors and memory chips in my master's, which was in VLSI design at UCLA. That was a very long time ago. I also then went to live in Tokyo, Japan, working in a large Japanese company, doing robotics research in a research lab in a large company. Also learned the language, Japanese, learned to read and write, was basically living the Japanese life in Japan.
How long did it take you to learn Japanese? Sorry to pause you, but that's
Yeah.
quite.
Yeah, no. So after basically, I really took it upon myself to learn it. So I used to go to class many times a week after work. And after 5 months, I told all my Japanese friends and colleagues that I only want to speak in Japanese, and they were very gracious and they complied. And that so basically, after 5 months, I was speaking only Japanese with all my Japanese friends and colleagues, and those are the people I was basically liaising with. I didn't really have much to do with the gaijin, the foreign population. That was by design.
And that's because right now Tokyo is just filled with a lot of foreigners, a lot of gaijin, and that's a very amazing strategy. So you're able to speak it within 6 months, it sounds like.
Yeah, yeah. Also got my Japanese driver's license, had a motorcycle. I used to commute to work on my motorcycle. So I was basically living like a Japanese person, but just a strange looking one.
Right, right. What part of Tokyo were you in?
I was in Kichijoji, which is a university town, but very cool, very hip university town.
Is KO Univer what university is there?
I forget. I think it was Japan. Yeah, I forget actually.
Okay. But yeah, I definitely I've heard of Kichijoji. My sister lives in is based in Tokyo.
Oh,
She's
nice.
about 7 minutes train ride away from Shibuya. But yeah, so what made you decide to go to Tokyo originally to start your career? That's a very unique start. So it sounds like you got your undergrad in India, moved
Yeah,
to LA, got
yeah.
your master's in LA. And then I also see that you got your computer science degree at Stanford as well, and then NYU.
Yeah, so Stanford was much later, and I didn't get a degree. It was more to refresh my knowledge of everything that's happened in the last 20 years in the world of computer science. So I took freshman and sophomore courses at Stanford, along with freshman and sophomore students, like completely from scratch, to kind of completely refresh my knowledge. So I'm a lifelong learner, and I like to either learn new things or refresh my past knowledge. But and NYU was actually an MBA that I did after I had already pivoted to banking. I pivoted from engineering to banking and ended up on Wall Street. That's where again, to continue learning, I did my MBA at NYU Stern part-time. And then a few years later, again, I felt like I need to refresh my knowledge. So I did my CFA as well, which is quite a coveted finance designation in the world of finance.
What does kind of lifelong learning mean to you? Because I know there's so many people that reach a goal, accomplish the goal, they get to a position that they're at, and then they kind of stagnate and they kind of get to a comfortable position. So what does lifelong learning and continual
Yeah.
growing mean to you?
So my comfort zone is really outside my comfort zone. That's how I think about it. That is, as soon as I get in my comfort zone, I get out of it because I really belong outside. And it's a very fulfilling, satisfying, enriching experience. So, for example, when I lived in London for many years, I learned to play the saxophone from scratch. I took lessons for 5 years to play the
Thousands.
saxophone. It opened up a completely new world. I'd never played an instrument before. Also took 2 years of piano, even took a singing lesson, believe it or not. So just opening new worlds, building new synapses in your brain. I love all that.
That's fantastic. And how long did it take you to kind of master these skills, like learning the saxophone, singing? I'm assuming you probably have taken dancing as well. How long does it take you to kind of master these? And what's your recommendation to kind of jump into a new thing and get good at it?
Yeah, I think every activity has its own learning curve. I would say the learning curve for music is extremely steep and extremely long. So I would say even after 5 years, I could barely make a tune. I wasn't doing it full time, but I was enjoying the process. For me, it's more about the process of learning. It's not where you get to. And it's similar for all my other activities, all my adventure sports. I've been flying airplanes for more than 20 years. And I think That's one thing where you really have to get proficient to be able to perform. So it's not something you can do half-heartedly. So when it comes to things like aviation or sailing or skiing or mountaineering, all the other sports, scuba diving, all those sports, I have reached a certain level of proficiency that I can do those things safely and also take other people with me and still enjoy it.
Do you have your pilot's license?
Yeah, I have my pilot's license for both fixed wing aircraft as well as helicopters. I've been flying for more than 20 years. Yeah.
And for those that don't, it takes you have to fly what 10,000 hours or 1,000 no 1,000 hours in order to get your pilot's license.
Oh, yeah, no, much less than that. I think for a private pilot license, you can probably get it in 60 to 80 hours,
Okay. Well,
but it still takes a lot of dedication and perseverance and consistency to get there. I heard there's a 90% dropout rate between people who start working on their pilot's license and people who actually
right. I mean, I'm sure it's a huge time commitment and a financial commitment, and I feel like finding, airtime and the kind of logistics. I used to live in Seattle, and a lot of my friends were aspiring to be pilots, and it's a big aviation city. Where did you learn to? Was it in San Francisco or?
Yeah, I initially learned in Berkeley, and then I moved to New York. So I flew in New York, which is where I am now for many, many years. Then I went back to San Francisco, was flying there. Then I moved to London. So I flew in London for 11 years, both airplanes and helicopters. And then I came back to San Francisco, was flying a lot over there, and now I'm flying in New York, in around New York City now.
Eric, and what kind of plane do you fly?
Just fixed wing, four-seater, single prop, Cessnas and Pipers. And
I love it.
helicopters are Robinson 22s and Robinson 44s.
Wow. Okay. Very cool. Yeah, I have a buddy actually that works at a hangar and tells me all about different like hydrolight Cessnas, different helicopters. So amazing. So you started your career in Tokyo, eventually made your way to San Francisco, then New York, then London. Is that kind of like the
That's right. But between New York and London, I actually moved back to Silicon Valley and left my banking career to build
Hmm.
my first startup from scratch. So basically, started a brand new career in the startup world after having accomplished a lot in the world of finance. Late 99, early 2000, I moved to Silicon Valley and started my very, very first startup.
And that was
So that was
I got
ideas.
okay. Yeah, I was looking. Is that currently? Because I did look up ideas.com. Is that
Not at all. It was a completely different company, different model altogether. It was a marketplace for ideas where consumers could sell their ideas to big companies for real money.
so? Just curious, why did you? So you started your career as a engineer in robotics in Tokyo. Then you worked in finance, and then you went back to startups. So what? Why'd you decide to go kind of start in robotics engineering, which is probably seems like a very difficult career, but very interesting into finance and then into startups.
Yeah, so I felt like at some point during my short engineering career, I felt like I was not really suited for an long-term engineering career. I felt like I had more of a business mind, more of a people person. So I was happier being around people rather than, being stuck in front of a computer. So hence the pivoting to the world of finance. And I really, really enjoyed the journey of, firstly, even getting into the world of finance with absolutely no knowledge of the field, and then learning and growing inside the industry. So it was a very, very fruitful, both financially as well as intellectually, very, very rewarding journey. And then the startup was basically so ultimately I have a builder mindset as with an engineering background. I have a builder mindset, so I like building. And when I realized what was happening in Silicon Valley in those days, I realized that actually I absolutely have to be part of that phenomenon because it's an amazing opportunity to build something that can be adopted by a very large number of businesses or companies or people and be able to have large scale impact, which you just cannot have in the working in the world of finance. In the world of finance, you will always be a small piece of a very large puzzle. And also you'll be primarily what I call moving money around from one pocket to another. And you really can't have the kind of impact you can have in the world of startups. So the question then is, why did I move back to banking? Moving to London and moving back to banking is
Yeah.
because I didn't know what to do with myself when Web 1.0 blew up. We ran out of money. We had to shut down the company, and I didn't have any visibility into the future at all. I had no idea where we'll end up today, where we are in terms of the tech world. I was too naive to know, to be able to predict where the tech world is going to end up. So the natural thing for me to do was go back to what I know really, really well, which was the world of finance, which gives you a very comfortable lifestyle, very good financial outcome. And then the change I made was, instead of going back to New York, I went to London. So at least I'm having a new experience in terms of living in a new continent, new country, new culture, all of that.
Comparing, they're all major cities, Tokyo, San Francisco, New York, and London. Kind of did you like most about each one, and what do you prefer out of all four?
Yeah, it's very hard to say. All of them have really, really strong advantages. Tokyo is almost like a dream. Anybody who's gone to Tokyo would just blown away by what's there. And having actually lived there as a local is actually an amazing privilege. San Francisco, again, an amazing city. Still, I would say center of gravity of tech is there, even though it seems to be shifting away from it very slowly, combined with amazing lifestyle, amazing topography, amazing landscape, all of that. New York is New York. There's what else can I say? New York is New York. And then London, I actually kind of prefer almost because it's the most cosmopolitan city that I know. It's also very centrally located. So it has influences from Asia, from Africa, from the Middle East, from the US. So it's just it's like a really amalgamation of every single type of person, language, culture, and influences from everywhere. So, you walk down the street in London and you'll hear like 30 languages within a few blocks, people talking in different languages. Yeah. So it's a fascinating place.
Yeah, it sounds like even a bigger melting. Because I've only been to New York twice, New York City, but I've never been to London, but I'd imagine it'd be a even bigger melting pot
It
than New
is.
York City too. Um, but that's amazing. And so when you were in London, on your LinkedIn it says you speak six languages here and there. What other languages um, do you know? And I know that your strategy to learn Japanese was basically to speak it 100% after about 5 months. But what other languages do you know, and what's your strategy to picking up a language?
Yeah, so I grew up in India speaking Hindi and English both fluently. So those are both native languages. And then I went to Japan to learn Japanese there. When I was living in New York, I actually moved to Mexico City temporarily to learn Spanish. So I became pretty fluent in Spanish. I came back to New York literally thinking in Spanish. So I did a total immersion course. I took lessons, lived with a Mexican family, all of that, and I really maintained that language very, very well as well. And then when I lived in London, like most people, for the British, French is usually the second language. And there's a very strong French influence. We obviously also learned British English, which I say, tongue in cheek. So different language than what we speak in this country. But also learned French, had a French tutor, going to France a lot, had a lot of French friends. And then at some point, I moved to Berlin, Germany, to start my second startup. And I was there for 2 years. So I consistently took lessons, German lessons at Goethe, which is their kind of official German language institute. So while I was building my startup, I was also taking German lessons for the entire time I was there.
And just curious, how did you structure your day learning a new language and running a startup? Because you're basically doing, two full-time jobs running a startup and then
Yeah.
learning another language, which was super difficult.
Totally, yeah. So, my method is basically as much as possible, total immersion is my only way to learn a language. So, all the languages I've typically learned where it is spoken natively. So, when in Germany, I was learning German. You're surrounded by Germans. You make it a point to surround yourself with natives rather than with foreigners. And then, you try to do the best you can. So, I was taking classes in the evenings after work in German.
So you basically would wake up, early in the morning, do your startup stuff, and then in the evenings
Yeah.
do
That's correct. Yeah.
classes. Wow. And how did you maintain the energy once you got to, I mean, I guess maybe you're so passionate about learning languages, you just had that natural energy
Yeah. I
once you
think
got
so. What I've learned in my life so far is that If you really want to understand a culture, you need to speak their language. There's a very strong connection between language and culture. Well, and I know I use Japan as an example where when I went there, I didn't speak the language, read or write or speak or understand. And I had a certain experience with the culture. When I learned the language, it was night and day. My understanding of the culture, of the people, everything about Japan was night and day because, as I said, there's such a close relationship between language and culture. So I understood Japanese people much better, understood their culture, their history, all of that significantly better after having learned the language. And also being able to relate to them in their own language. Because as you know, not everything translates very well from one language to another because every language has its own almost code. So being able to relate to people in their own language opens up a whole new world.
And when you're in Japan, just because I know that pretty much the nail that sticks out gets hammered down, once you learn the language, they kind of, you know, I'm half Japanese, and even being a half Japanese person in Japan, they still don't accept me fully just because I'm still half Japanese. We're able to kind of synonymously assimilate to their culture. It sounds like you're basically just Japanese
Yep.
writing
Yeah. So yeah.
Japanese
So I
language.
also have a view on that. Is that I think the way people think about assimilation is that those people need to assimilate you. The way I think about it is that you have to assimilate them. So if you act and behave in a way that demonstrates that you're willing and able to assimilate, they welcome you with open arms. And as far as I'm concerned, I was always with Japanese people. I played with them, I worked with them, I did everything with them. And I really didn't see any difference between how they would treat me versus they would treat a fellow Japanese person. And maybe a lot of that is in my own head, but that's all that matters, right? As long as I don't feel that I'm not being assimilated, then I'm not being assimilated, and that's all that matters.
And when you were able to start learning the kanji and like the specific characters, just because for me, I'm just kind of like, this is I mean, it's really tough for me to learn kanji, but I'm assuming you were able to learn
Yep.
kanji.
So I
Were you
learned
able to?
about 1,200 characters, and I happened to have a really good school where I learned, and also some very, very good books. And there's a whole method to learning kanji, right? So basically, these are characters that build on top of each other. So, for example, there's a character for a person, a man. And then if you add two more strokes on top of that, then it's a man in a house, for example. So if you understand then it gets much easier. You just build an intuitive understanding of how the language was built because each symbol, each character in kanji has a meaning in itself, right? So it is almost like a word or sometimes even a sentence, even one character. So if you understand how the character was built and how the strokes were drawn, then you can build a much better understanding of kanji.
Yeah, I'll have to definitely that changes my perspective on it because I always just see it as something that's so. I mean, I grew up most of my life in Montana. I was born in Japan originally, but grew up in Montana. Right? Basically, moved here right after I was born. But that's amazing that you're able to learn. And it took you about a year because you were there for in Tokyo for a year.
Yeah, even less than that. Yeah. 9 months. Yeah.
And then with Spanish, just curious, how long did it take you to learn Spanish?
So Spanish, I lived in Mexico for literally 3 weeks, but complete total immersion, complete like 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. classes 6 days a week, and living with a Mexican family, going to brunch with them, hanging out with them in the evenings at night, all of that. So it was complete immersion. And I came back literally thinking in Spanish when I got back to New York.
Just in 3 weeks.
Yep.
Wow. That's amazing. Well, so just to kind of go back to your career, so after going back to London, working in finance, then you ended up starting Oximity and then eventually NachoNacho. And it looks like, did you go through a couple of accelerators when you were starting those?
Yeah. So actually, Oximity was seeded by 500 startups.
Okay, well,
And then NachoNacho, we went through the Alchemist Accelerator.
very cool. So, tell me about Oximity, and it got acquired by Scribe.
Script, yeah.
How did that process go?
Yeah, so we started out again with a big vision. The big vision was we wanted to build a completely new system for news. News not as in Medium or Substack or Twitter, but actually substantive news that people need for their day-to-day lives, actual factual news. and to effectively replace mainstream news media with a much better system for news. So that was a big vision. We built a lot of very, very cool technology. We had a lot of content. We had, engineers working in the company, German engineers. My co-founder is German. He was our CTO. And 2 years later, I moved back to New York, to San Francisco. 2 years after that, we were acquired by Scribd, which is a seller of subscriptions for ebooks and audiobooks. And they saw value in the content that we had collected. And they're ultimately a content subscription company.
And so you just accumulated just a ton of different articles from all over the world, different news articles.
Yeah, so the idea was that the content that we were collecting was content, as we like to call it, from the source, not from other journalists or other news organizations or from news agencies. It was content from the source. So actually where news actually happens. So it could be nonprofits, it could be companies, it could be institutions, it could be other smaller journalistic networks and amplifying their voices, et cetera, et cetera. So it was almost what we like to call a network of networks of news media.
Of it. Do you think that if a company's, reporting, there's always going to be kind of a bias or positive light
Of
when they're
course.
reporting about themselves?
Yeah, of course. So the way we were thinking about it is that make everything people powered. So the company would report themselves, but then everyone else who's involved in that story from any perspective can add their own version. And then we didn't have AI at that time. We didn't even have blockchain at that time. Those are two very powerful tools which could have actually been used very effectively for that project. But blockchain came just as we had already been acquired, and AI is, at least in its current form, is a much more recent phenomenon. But I think there's still an amazing opportunity to build a completely new system for news today.
Be kind of using the ledger to track the source of the news, basically. Yeah,
Yeah,
interesting.
and the source of it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
How did working in finance and then working as an engineer build your founder and CEO mindset?
So working as an engineer or studying engineering just gives you a very good way to structure your thinking, analytical thinking, and that applies to anything you do, right? It applies even in your personal lives and how you run your life, for example. Working in finance, firstly, it gave me financial stability personally.
Hmm.
Secondly, it helped me build my sense of commerce in terms of how money is made, how to negotiate deals, all the things that go with from a business perspective. So I learned everything on the job. I did very well, and just being able to figure out where the money is, being able to originate the right deals, being able to structure them, being able to execute them, working with large customers, large organizations. All of that is, it just trains your mind to be able to deal with any business activity.
That makes total sense. And then, so after your company got acquired, then you started Nacho Nacho, or what was kind of?
Yeah, so actually after that, I, spent a year at Scribd helping integrate everything we had built into Scribd. After that, I spent a year in actually blockchain because the blockchain was just emerging at that time. And I was very fascinated by the whole premise of blockchain, the premise of decentralization. I was intellectually extremely fascinated by it. So went very deep into it, learned even to program in Solidity, which is the language for smart contracts, Ethereum language for smart contracts. I got to know everybody, all the deep thinkers and architects and influencers in the blockchain world. I also worked in a company, a blockchain company running an ICO team, initial coin offering, which is now what is NFT today used to be called ICOs in those days. There's more or less equivalent. So ran a team to do that as well. So was deeply immersed in the world of blockchain and crypto as well for a year. So decided to exit that. Kind of got disillusioned with the ability of blockchain to actually fundamentally change society. That was the thing that was most exciting for me. And I got disillusioned. And frankly, even till today, I challenged my blockchain, friends to demonstrate where blockchain is actually making a real difference in day-to-day lives of people. And I think it might happen one day, and I really look forward to that. And I would, wish the best of luck to all the people who are working in it to make that happen. But that's really what I want to see.
No, I one of my friends, his name's Jackson Smith. He has a company called Learning Economy, and they actually are utilizing blockchain in education, creating like an educational ledger to value and create smart contracts for basically valuing engineers and other kind of work like that. But and just kind of your thoughts on blockchain and what do you think the future of crypto, blockchain, decentralization, Web3?
I think so. The two things, right? One is that, so let's say the blockchain world, all the people involved in it in various capacities, let's say that's 10% of the overall tech world, right? And really, for me, what I look for is when will the work being done in blockchain transcends into the rest of the world, for the rest of the economy. And the second way to think about it is that whatever is being done in blockchain, can it be done without blockchain using other technology? So those are the two things I look for. So frankly, I don't know the answers and where we are heading. Obviously, I know that it has become a staple of speculation. What I don't know is that will it ever realize the real potential of blockchain, which in my mind is true decentralization. So I think it's an open question for me right now.
Because I think, you know, potentially it could work in places like Zimbabwe, and Venezuela, and other kind of places that don't kind of have, you know, crazy eclectic economies that could potentially use, decentralization for their locals, like their citizens, to potentially start building wealth
Yeah,
instead of having a currency that's consistently in, 1000% inflation every single year.
right.
But what are your thoughts on DeFi and in kind of more developing countries like that?
Yeah, I think those are, current problems in those countries. I fully agree. And this is frankly, a short-term solution where you are, dealing in, let's say, a stable coin versus dealing in your own currency to preserve your own wealth. I don't think it's a long-term solution to those economies. I think those economies ultimately have to stabilize themselves. So it's almost a hack for people to convert their local currency somehow using some kind of on-ramp, whether it's legal or semi-legal or completely unauthorized into a stable coin. So I think it's more of a patchwork rather than a real solution for those economies. Ultimately, most of my banking career has been in emerging markets. So I've dealt significantly in Latin America, Africa, Asia, Eastern Europe, all those countries. And we have seen many, many countries who have actually come out of those funks and become stabilized. And for example, Chile is a great example of a country that is now considered the Switzerland of Latin America, very stable with a real economy, with a stable currency and all of that. So I think that's the real solution to those countries. In the short term, yes, I think stable coins and blockchain and Bitcoin can be a solution for the citizens of that country to solve their immediate problem.
And another kind of example too, Argentina recently elected a libertarian, kind of an extremist libertarian, named Javier Milei. I'm sure you've been keeping up with that, but it seems like he's been able to stabilize the Argentine economy as well, which is fantastic. But going to different countries, emerging markets, uh, I noticed as well you've been to over 94 different countries. Uh, what originally got you with the travel bug, and what countries have you? What are your favorite countries that you've been to? Because you've been to so many.
Yeah, I get asked that quite a lot. Again, because I've learned that one of the ways to learn about the world is actually going there. And it's amazing every time I've gone to a country, how my perspective of the world changes. Not just that country, but the whole world, because every country, every region views the world with a very different lens. So we get, overpowered by our lens, which living in this country, in the US, by the US media, all of that, even though technically all resources are available everywhere, but the narrative changes substantially when you go to different countries. So you get a much better view of what the world actually looks like by having been to all those countries. I mean, other than that, it's just the joy of traveling. I think, I recommend that to everyone and even people growing up now. And as soon as you are able to travel, you should travel. And the more you travel, the more you'll be able to learn about everything.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say I've been traveling ever since I've been really young, but I've been to over 30 different countries and love traveling, and I couldn't agree more that your perspective changes a lot. And also just it's interesting too because China, a lot of outside places outside of America perceive China as actually beneficial. Obviously China's loaning them a lot of resources for them to, develop in places like Africa and Latin America. So it's very interesting kind of seeing different perspectives because in the
Absolutely.
US it's totally different. But I'm sorry I
Absolutely,
interrupted.
yeah.
Just going back to your favorite countries that you've been to.
Yeah, so for me, I've traveled so much. I've lived in all major continents, and I've seen the developed world quite a lot. So it's obviously great to go to travel to Paris or whatever, Berlin or London, all of that. So I consider that home ground. What I get really excited about is going off the beaten path. And the more raw the place is, the more I get excited. I would say among the top is Namibia, for example, in Africa, which is extremely raw, but absolutely fascinating from a landscape, from every perspective. It's just almost
Right north of South Africa on the west coast.
exactly,
The
yeah. It's
Durban.
almost surreal. Everything about it is almost surreal. So I would say that's easily in the top five. I was in Antarctica, again, completely surreal, raw, untouched by civilization. You really get a sense of how planet Earth was before humans invaded it. You get that sense, really strong sense. It's almost like being on a different planet. That's easily in the top five. Madagascar, again, fascinating country in many ways, culturally, in terms of natural beauty, wildlife, all of that would qualify, I think. We went to Guyana, which is one of the least traveled countries in Latin America. When we went there, I think 3,000 tourists used to go there per year, and we were 3,001, 2002.
It's right next to
Since then,
Venezuela, right?
yeah,
There's like
near
French
Venezuela.
Guyana, Venezuela,
Yeah, and since then they found oil, and now everything is changed.
of
Everything
course.
absolutely changed. Everyone's there now. But when we went there, I think 80% of Guyana is untouched jungle. And we went actually deep into the jungle and literally lived there with local natives who had never left the the country or even the forest. Another fascinating trip I did was deep into the Amazon jungle from Peru. Again, we were deep in Amazon jungle where they had never seen any kind of outside tourists, or maybe very few, and really witnessing how people have been living there for centuries. The local native Indians have been living there for centuries and their lifestyle. So absolutely. We did a survival trip living off the land in the Amazon jungle, basically hunting for food and fishing for food and living off the land and learning how to build traps and learning how to fish and all those things. So yeah,
That sounds amazing.
those were some of my probably top. Yeah, but it's very hard to say. I also am a mountaineer, so I climbed Aconcagua in Argentina, which is the highest mountain in North and South America.
Isn't
That
also
was
that has the highest, what's the word I'm looking for, where from the viewpoint it's the highest or the second highest peak behind Mount Everest? I think it's Denali's the third as far as from the mountain, what's it called? Evidence or
I'm
what
not
I'm
sure.
basically from the sea level from the viewpoint to the top of the mountain.
Uh-huh.
The one in Argentina I think is like the second or third highest peak.
Got it. Okay, very interesting. I actually didn't know that statistic. It's 23,000 feet, 7,000 meters. It's the highest mountain in North and South America. So climb that. So that is another experience, even though it's really about climbing the mountain, but it's an experience in itself. I also climbed Denali in Alaska. That was another completely different trip. Yeah, that also summited that as well.
Amazing. So obviously you do so many different things from sailing to climbing, skydiving. What does like an average, let's just say like an average week for Sanjay Goel, how does that look being the founder and CEO of Nacho Nacho, fitting in family time and fitting in all these amazing fun adventures?
Yeah, there's no one I mean, I'm sure you expected that. There's no one average week for me. I was just in Costa Rica for 9 days. I was surfing every day in warm waters in Nosara, but also found time to do some work. And while in New York, we do winter mountaineering trips in Catskills and Adirondacks. I fly airplanes usually every other week, flying to some nearby airport for lunch or dinner, like a day trip, something like that. You can see my bicycles as soon as spring comes. I'll start cycling again outdoors in open roads outside Manhattan. So I'm gonna rock climb this evening indoors in a rock climbing gym. So it's all just fitting everything in.
Okay. And just to go back to Nacho Nacho, if you can explain your experience starting Nacho Nacho, what the kind of what your inspiration was to start NachoNacho and how things are going.
Yeah, so when I was at Scribd, we were selling subscriptions, and that's where I was looking for new channels for user acquisition. And we were already using all possible channels like affiliate marketing, SEO, SEM, PR, all possible, all known channels. And I realized that there was something missing in the whole subscription economy, which is there's no Amazon.com for subscriptions. So if you make widgets, you can go to Amazon.com, sign up as a seller, and get exposure to potentially hundreds of millions of consumers. Right? So you don't have to build your own um, marketing and sales apparatus to be able to find customers. All you have to do is plug into Amazon's e-commerce ecosystem. Amazon.com is a two-sided marketplace. 60% of their sales come from third-party sellers. So very vibrant, huge ecosystem that creates value for all sides. For consumers, it's as they say, it's maximum choice, best price, and best fulfillment, right? And for sellers, it's their channel for finding new customers and much cheaper than having to build your own sales and marketing. So I realized that actually we need something like that for subscriptions, for the world of subscriptions. So before NachoNacho, every SaaS vendor has, and even today, they have to build their own sales and marketing apparatus, right? And then they spend a lot of money on Google ads and all of that. The reality is that if you have a marketplace, the customers are already there. Like you and I are already on Amazon.com. So it is much cheaper for the SaaS, for the sellers in a marketplace to get exposed to existing buyers as opposed to having to find new buyers every day. So that was kind of the premise, is that we need a marketplace to harmonize the whole subscription economy, the SaaS economy. And really what it comes down to is network effects. Once you have network effects in a marketplace, you create value for all sides. So as an example, if I want to drive a ride-sharing car, I would sign up for Uber and Lyft. Why? Because all the passengers are already there. And if I'm a passenger, I'm looking for a ride, I'm going to go to Uber or Lyft. Why? Because all the drivers are there. So it's a very powerful ecosystem where network effects actually keep bringing people in it. And it creates value for me as a rider, it creates value for drivers because they have a ready pool of passengers available. The same phenomenon in Airbnb. If I'm a guest, I go to Airbnb to find lodging. If I'm a host, I sign up because all the guests are coming there. And it's the same with Amazon.com. Why sellers and buyers sign up, right? So that is what we have built for software. And then we also added services. So basically, net, what we do today is we have more than 800 top SaaS products listed in a marketplace, SaaS and AI products listed in a marketplace. And we help them reduce their CAC, their cost of user acquisition, because we already have buyers who are using our platform. And also because we know a lot about our buyers and we have continuous engagement with our buyers. So it's much easier for us to sell the next product to our existing buyers than for a SaaS vendor to go and find that buyer completely from scratch. So that's the power of network effects. And for buyers, it's a very convenient place to search for all different products. We have a discovery module using AI ML, and then we have discounts on more than 800 top SaaS products. So the buyer actually gets a better price by coming to NachoNacho. And in spite of that, the sellers actually still reduce their CAC. So actually both sides win, and we also get to keep a small margin. So all sides win in a marketplace.
NachoNacho's been fantastic for the Gilder community, and we really appreciate the partnership that we have. Why did you name it NachoNacho?
So I was in a whimsical mood, and I got really tired of looking for a really intelligent name that will explain our vision. Because as you can understand, naming is today very, very difficult. All .com names are taken, blah, blah, blah. So I was in a whimsical mood, and I just said, I don't want to think about this anymore. I will just put a placeholder for now. And then later on, as we develop, we will find a really smart name and pivot to that name. And that was more than 4 years ago, still stuck with the same name. It turns out that Nacho Nacho in Hindi means dance dance.
Love it. I think I also love the name. I love your branding. I think it's a fantastic solution, and that's a very interesting story as well. And I love how you've kept the name and never rebranded to a different name. But Sanjay, I really appreciate your time today. Do you have any advice, any words of wisdom that you'd like to share to our listeners? A lot of them are founders.
Oh, yeah, where do I start? I would say that the first thing I would tell founders is that don't start a company just because everyone else is starting a company. I think there's a lot of people who start companies for the wrong reasons. Some say, oh, I want to be my own boss. Some say, I want to be the next billionaire unicorn. There are many, many wrong reasons to start a startup. And even though, yes, technically you are your own boss, you may be the CEO, but you still have people you report to, your board, your investors, your customers, your team. You report to your team as well. So no one is actually above reporting. Everyone reports to somebody. It's kind of circular, right? So the board reports to shareholders, shareholders report to other people, so everyone reports to somebody. So I think there's a lot of wrong reasons to start a startup. My general rule of thumb, if and when I do build a company, I don't build it just to build it, just because I want to be a founder. I build it when an idea comes to me. And that's the key point, is that I don't sit around and say, I want to build a company. So let me go and find an idea. I start a company when I see natively or find a need that I have experienced myself, or an idea that comes to me by living my life, doing everything else that I do. I could be working in a big company. I could be doing something else. But then I feel that the idea has come to me. That's when I start a company. So I don't go chasing ideas or looking for ideas or even listen to VCs who say, oh, this is the next 10 things we need to build. So please build those things. No, not at all. The idea really has to come to you natively. That's when you'll have a passion for it. That's when you would have found a real need. And that's when I think you should build. There are so many other things to do with your career. I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with working for a larger company, even though it comes with its own issues. But so does building a startup. And I think, frankly, I would even encourage people to start a career by working in big, small, medium-sized companies to get some kind of mileage, some kind of real-world experience before you jump into building your own company.
I think that's some of the best advice for founders to hear. Uh, yeah, because I think so many people do start startups for the wrong reasons, and then a lot of them fail, and then a lot of people get upset, and then it ends up a little speed bump in their career. But I think encountering a situation over and over, or having it come to you, having that idea come to you, and experiencing it naturally and organically, I think that's fantastic advice, and I really appreciate your time, Sanjay. Thank you so much for being a fantastic guest on the Gilder Spotlight podcast. And I
Yeah,
hope you have
thank you.
a fantastic rest of your day.
Yeah, you too. Talk to you then.